I think that we both believed if we were going to lead our family as a united team that we needed to be the same.
Yeah.
But as we tried to change each other and achieve that sameness, we ended up with the opposite result. We weren't becoming united as a team. Instead, we were competing against each other around whose way was going to be right and whose way was going to be wrong. Welcome to the Blended Family Coaching Show, where you'll discover how to move your stepfamily from just surviving to truly thriving.
Grab your headphones and listen in as we share practical, real-life strategies for building healthy bonds,
Understanding the kids' perspective,
romance and partnership,
parenting with great teamwork.
and yes, even co-parenting with a difficult ex.
We're Mike and Kim Anderson, and we believe with the right tools, every step couple can overcome the common challenges of stepfamily life.
Join us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations to discover how you can lead your family with confidence and create the future you really want.
Well, hey there, welcome. We are so glad that you're joining us as you do every week. Mm-hmm. And hey, while you're thinking about it, why don't you go ahead and hit subscribe or follow wherever you might be. Maybe you're on Spotify or Google Podcasts or Apple Podcasts, wherever you're at. Just go ahead and click that. And if you're willing, we would love to hear from you if you want to leave us a rating or a review. So enough of that. How about we jump into today's topic?
Yeah, let's dive in. You know, last week we talked about Craig Groeschel's concept of puck.
Puck, that's right.
Yep, the pain, uncertainty, and chaos we'll all face as we blend our family. And we shared why it's necessary to pucker up and learn how to face the pain, embrace the uncertainty, and endure the chaos as you create a growth-minded family culture together.
That's right.
And if you caught that episode, hopefully you're already asking yourself the questions that we posed, and you might be thinking about some of the practical steps you could take to lead your family well,
sure,
even if you're experiencing pain, uncertainty, and chaos in your home right now.
If?
Yeah, you probably are.
Right.
And, you know, if you missed last week's episode, we'll put a link in the show notes so that you can go back and listen, because all of us have to face these disheartening realities if we want to reach those awesome goals and the dreams that we have for our family.
For sure.
Now, today is a bit of a continuation around some additional realities, right? The tough stuff that we all tend to come up against as we blend.
Mm-hmm.
Things that have the potential to derail our family's bonding process, cause some relational damage, and even more puck.
Yeah, that's right.
So, we're really grateful for Craig's insights that we used last week. And today we're grateful for a couple that we got to hear speak at a blended family event back in April called Blended and Blessed. Mm-hmm. Ray and Robin McKelvey shared a few things that they called unity breakers.
Right.
And you might find these to be quite surprising and unexpected, and that's why we want to talk about them.
Yeah, for sure. You know, we say that they're unexpected because these specific approaches, attitudes, or beliefs might be things that you hadn't really thought about as being detrimental to your family's unity. For most of us, these will probably feel counterintuitive because they can disguise themselves as unity builders, not breakers.
Absolutely.
But we've seen how these areas can lead to disconnection, confusion, and dysfunction, even though they seem maybe innocuous or even helpful at times. These three things are actually easy wrong turns that couples unintentionally make along the way. And, you know, we've made a few of them as well.
Yep. And today we'll uncover 3 specific unity breakers that reveal the hidden tricks these things can play on us that actually keep us from building unity, so that you don't make those same mistakes that we did.
Totally.
So let's dive in with the first unity breaker, and that's sameness. We sometimes tend to think that achieving sameness will lead to unity.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this can be a hard one for us to get our heads around, because as human beings, we want to relate to each other and feel a sense of belonging. We also want to feel comfortable. And generally, people that are different, maybe they live a little bit differently or have perspectives that are unlike our own.
Yeah.
This dynamic, it makes us feel a little uneasy for lots of reasons.
Yeah, all kinds of reasons. Our differences can make us feel distant from each other.
Mm-hmm.
And last week we talked about how we come into our blended family dynamic with two separate cultures. But it's not just the logistics of life or how we do things that creates discomfort. We also come in with different backgrounds, like our family of origin story and our romantic histories that can often be very different, which means our life perspectives have emerged from experiences that are simply not the same. Mm-hmm. And in addition to our differing histories, plenty of other things might be different as well. Our personality traits, our priorities, our desires, our expectations, and our general outlook on life. And all of that is going to impact the different ways that we tend to handle stress and approach difficult issues. Our communication styles might be different, and our approach to conflict resolution might be different. And of course, we often discover that our parenting styles are quite different, right? Especially how we relate and respond to our children as different adults and different bio parents. Yeah, lots of differences.
And often when we begin the merging process of our families, we believe that the goal is to achieve sameness, right? And we work really hard at trying to change each other so that we can get on the same page and make united decisions without all the disagreement and tension that we've been experiencing.
Totally. If you were just on my page, then everything would be fine, right?
Of course. We might think that sameness and unity are synonymous. But that's the hidden issue here. Mm-hmm. Sameness and unity are two different things.
Yeah.
You can experience unity without being the same.
Yeah.
And, I really struggled with this for years with you, honey, because I didn't realize until after we got married what a structured person you are. And I was really uncomfortable with what I thought at the time was you having to have control. It felt like a real big control issue for me. You wanted things to be organized a specific way. You had to plan everything out. And for you, being on time meant showing up 10 minutes early.
Yeah, it still kind of does.
I know. And the reason why it's so uncomfortable was because I don't like to worry about being overly organized, and I hate planning. And I'd way rather be spontaneous. And 5 minutes late is running right on time for me.
Oh, man, I'm getting anxiety just thinking about it.
So you and I did a lot of headbutting around a lot of things back then in the beginning. And so I thought the answer was that you needed to change so that you weren't such a controlling person. I really thought that you were a control freak and it was driving me crazy and cramping my go-with-the-flow style of living life. And I'm sure that you were feeling like I needed to change back then.
Oh, of course I was. And, I had a bit of a different story in my head because my idea was that it wasn't just about you having this go-with-the-flow style and approach to life, but, the story in my head sometimes was that you just didn't care. You didn't care about what needed to happen in our family and about making sure that, different things were happening. And especially when it came to parenting, where we butted heads a lot in this area. And sometimes that even translated to this feeling like you didn't care about me. But I've learned over the years that is so far from the truth.
Yeah.
That's not even close. We just weren't the same, but we weren't figuring out that sameness and unity were two different things.
Right.
I think that we both believed if we were going to lead our family as a united team that we needed to be the same when it came to all these kind of things and a whole lot more.
Yeah.
But as we tried to change each other and achieve that sameness, we ended up with the opposite result. We weren't becoming united as a team. Instead, we were competing against each other around whose way was going to be right and whose way was going to be wrong. We were actually creating more disconnection in our relationship because we were now focused on defending our own perspectives and our preferences and kind of judging each other.
Yeah.
Instead, we should have been focusing on understanding each other and building the unity that we really wanted. When we were getting stuck in those cycles of conflict, we were buried under some unresolved issues and resentments and frustrations.
Yeah, that was a difficult time.
Sure.
You know, when we get to coach couples through the Relate Strong program, we help them to learn about accepting each other's differences and even celebrating and cherishing those attributes that are different in both of them. They learn to enjoy the fact that they will always be two unique individuals with different preferences, personalities, and perspectives.
Yep.
And they discover that they can have a new, healthier focus when it comes to those differences. We ask them to focus on their usness. And usness is sometimes referred to as a third entity of the relationship.
Yeah.
Kind of like that child that our relationship bears.
I love our usness.
And in focusing on usness, we're able to approach our problems from a more unified perspective and collaborate with each other rather than compete against each other.
Absolutely. You know, you said that it was this usness thing. It's kind of like a child that our relationship bears, which is a concept that we learned from Terry and Sharon Hargrave, who developed the Relate Strong process.
Right.
And when you think about it, you know, to most of us, it's obvious that a small child requires care and nurturing and attentiveness, right? We all know that. Well, usness requires those same exact things. To genuinely experience unity, we need to be willing to intentionally build and nurture our usness, you know, to care for it by investing in ways of communicating and cooperating as we solve problems together and stay united, even though we're still individuals with very unique differences.
Right.
And, you know, it's not in spite of our differences, as if we're just like gutting it out with each other, but it's actually because of our differences that we get to find that unity. It's when we let go of trying to achieve sameness and we focus on understanding and celebrating the unique ways that we each contribute to our usness. That's when we finally stop getting exhausted by trying to change each other.
Right.
Now, we've been through that process, honey, of creating some usness in our marriage. And, you know, we're still trying to be attentive and building our usness along the way. It has radically changed how we work through issues, how we collaborate with each other, and how we problem solve together. We're so excited to let you know about something brand new we've created just for you.
We've realized that with so many episodes available here on the show, it might feel a bit overwhelming to find the topics that matter most to you. That's why we've created a simple tool for you to receive a personalized playlist focused on your current struggle or your biggest challenge.
That's right. It's called the Blended Family Breakthrough Quiz. You'll answer just a few questions, and based on your responses, we'll email you a curated custom playlist of episodes that are specific to you.
This simple quiz will direct you to the most impactful episodes that pertain to you personally and keep you on track in your journey of discovery, learning, and growth. So, scroll all the way to the bottom of the show notes for this episode and click the link to take the Blended Family Breakthrough Quiz today.
Okay, let's get back to the discussion.
Yeah, and like you said earlier, honey, in order to get there and to stay focused on usness, we really had to stop trying to change each other and let go of the misguided belief that we had to achieve sameness in order to be unified.
Totally.
Listen to this powerful statement from a book called Please Understand Me by David Kiersey. If you do not want what I want, please try not to tell me that my want is wrong. Or if my beliefs are different from yours, at least pause before you set out to correct them. I do not, for the moment at least, ask you to understand me. That will come only when you are willing to give up trying to change me into a copy of you. Let that sink in. Understanding me will come only when you're willing to give up trying to change me into a copy of you.
Wow.
That's such a powerful statement because we all desperately need to be understood and known in our relationship.
Totally, yeah.
But that can't happen when we're preoccupied with sameness. David goes on to say that one day, perhaps, in trying to understand me, you might come to prize my differences. And far from seeking to change me, you might preserve and even cherish those differences.
Man, I love that
Yeah.
because that's really the goal of unity.
Yeah.
Not only to accept our differences, but cherish them and appreciate what we each have to bring to the table.
Mm-hmm.
As we've nurtured our usness and learned to start making decisions from a place that honors both of us, even though we're very, very different.
Yeah, we are.
I've come to really appreciate your unique way of approaching life, and I value your perspectives.
Thanks, honey.
Mm-hmm.
And over the years, as I've become more willing to understand you and your unique wiring, I've let go of the control freak label that I put on you.
I'm so glad.
And rather than fighting against you, I've learned to lean into your tendencies and appreciate them. Now, that's not to say that I've changed who I am or that I disregard my own natural tendencies.
Right.
We've just learned to understand and honor each other, and we've stopped trying to change each other into a copy of ourselves. It's actually pretty freeing.
It's funny to hear this because we just had this happen yesterday morning. Like I remember you were in getting your makeup on or something, you were getting ready for the day, and you started asking me some questions about the day. Like, okay, well, when are we going to do this? And what time do you think that'll happen? Or how long is that going to take?
Plotting it out.
And I was like, whoa, hold on. I was like, I said something to the effect of, well, you know what? I'm really working today on just practicing spontaneity.
Ooh.
You were like, you pretty much said that exact same
like
thing.
that.
Oh, yeah, exactly. But it was so funny how the way you just said that, we were kind of leaning into each other's tendencies toward each other, not necessarily away, but we were actually trying to serve each other, I think, in that way.
Yeah, because I know how valuable it is for you to have a plan for the day, and you know how valuable it is for me to
go
have
with the flow.
spontaneity.
Yeah, totally. So that was kind of funny seeing that in action.
Yeah.
You know, this concept of usness sounds kind of nebulous, but it's very real.
Yeah.
And we've helped many couples to move away from competing against each other and instead learn to collaborate as a united team as they honor and protect their usness. We believe it's very doable for any couple who's willing to put in the work.
Yeah.
As long as they're willing to give up their compulsion to change each other and let go of the idea that sameness equates to unity.
That's right. Achieving sameness can't be the goal because each couple is comprised of two different and unique individuals. But let's expand this out a bit. Unity as a family doesn't mean the absence of diversity because every member of your family is different too.
That's right.
This means we all need to give up the idea that all the kids need to fall into line and respond in the same way.
Wait, what?
Yeah. This too is a misguided goal. The ultimate goal around unity as a family is not that everyone thinks the same, but rather that we all have the freedom to think together and be heard.
Yeah.
It's okay that we have different perspectives, and it shouldn't be surprising because everyone living under your roof has traveled a unique journey to get to this point.
Absolutely. And before we can be open to understanding each other's individual unique viewpoint, we first have to stop trying to change who they innately are.
Yep.
This is tough. I struggle with this for a long time. I spent a lot of energy trying to change Annika, my stepdaughter, into a copy of myself.
You did.
I really wanted her to be more organized and to manage her time better and to plan ahead. You know?
You guessed it. She's wired a lot like me.
Yeah, you guys are like two little peas in a pod. But when I was focused on changing Annika, I was missing the mark on truly knowing her and understanding her unique wiring. My focus was on trying to achieve sameness, and that didn't create unity in our family. It did just the opposite because Annika could sense that I was disapproving of what she was doing and probably translated that I was disapproving of her. And I'm sure she felt unknown and misunderstood. I actually forfeited opportunities to really connect with her because I believed that it was more important for her to be like me, and I was just wrong. And without even realizing it, I was undermining myself around the influence and the authority that I was trying to establish as her step-parent, because this dynamic was creating disconnection between me and Annika, not connection, what I was really after. And let me say this, the level of connection that a step-parent has with a stepchild is often directly proportionate to the level of influence that step-parent has as well. So my focus on sameness actually magnified our differences.
Ooh, say that again.
Our focus on sameness actually magnified our differences. But once I took a step back and I started to kind of get into her shoes a little bit, when I was open to understanding her better, then connecting with her became much easier. And slowly my influence grew, and ultimately our family's unity grew as well. Now, some of you listening, that might have just blown your mind. Like, you're like, oh, crud, right? and if you're a step parent and you're seeking some authority or influence and trying to be a positive influence in your stepchild's life,
goal.
You might need to back up about 45 seconds and just listen to that again, because all of this is interconnected and it's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, when we use this term unique wiring, part of what we're referring to is personality types. Understanding each family member's individual personalities can help a lot around this idea of building family unity from a place of understanding rather than sameness.
I love it.
And back in episode 75, which was called How to Use Personality Insights to Improve Your Approach to Parenting, we actually explored why it's so important to recognize the uniqueness of each child in your home and how personality-focused parenting can be used as a powerful tool for bonding in your stepfamily.
That's right.
So we'll put a link to that episode in the show notes if you want to learn more.
That's right. So the bottom line on this unity breaker is that achieving sameness is not the goal of unity. And this applies in your marriage and with your kids as well. You might just take a moment to pause right now and just ask yourself, where might I be trying to change my spouse, a child, or a stepchild to be more like me, and how might I shift my focus? Just press pause on the show right now. Maybe contemplate that.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to the next surprising unity breaker that leads lots of couples to make some easy wrong turns.
Yeah.
It's a little surprising.
It
is peacekeeping. Okay. Peacekeeping in your relationship and in your home won't create unity.
No.
Now, look, we all want to experience peace. But when our goal is to focus on peacekeeping, it's going to be hard to discover that unity we want. Ray McKelvey said that peacekeeping is different than peacemaking. Now, peacemaking is focused on problem solving and finding resolution to those places where we're struggling to see eye to eye. Peacemaking is usness centered, and it's bold and it's courageous all at the same time. Peacekeeping is different. It's focused on not rocking the boat. It's about avoiding conflict now, regardless of whether this conflict is going to erupt again tomorrow or next week or next year. We're not actually creating peace or unity. Instead, we're putting up a kind of a smoke screen, and we're living a bit of a facade.
Yeah, and that may sound a little harsh, and in a minute we're going to talk about why that's true. But first, let's acknowledge the reasons why some of us work really hard at peacekeeping.
Yep.
Because in the moment, it can feel helpful and loving in a relationship. Now, there was an interesting discussion at the Blended and Blessed event between the MC and Ray and Robin McKelvey right after their presentation.
Yeah.
In response to a question, Robin made this statement about facing conflict in her marriage. She said, "Dealing with the issues and entering into conflict helps our relationship to grow. It's because I love you that I want to enter into conflict and work through our issues. It makes us stronger."
Yeah.
Wow.
You know, when she said that, the MC made another statement in regard to his relationship with his own wife. He said, well, wait a second. My perspective is that it's because I love her that I want to avoid the conflict. So from his perspective, he was protecting his wife and their relationship by avoiding.
Right.
But Robin's perspective in her marriage, she really believed that entering into the conflict for the purpose of resolving the issue actually added a depth of strength and growth to their relationship. So facing that conflict was how she was protecting their relationship.
Yeah, very different perspectives on that. It was an interesting conversation between those two. And I think some of us can actually fluctuate between these two different perspectives. Mm-hmm. We can either be the peacekeeper and kind of avoid the conflict or just not want to rock the boat.
Yep.
Or sometimes we can be that peacemaker where we're facing the conflict and we really want to resolve things.
Sure.
And I think it depends on what the issue might be or how much discomfort or pain might be going on inside of us.
Right.
But most of us can probably lean into either approach.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in last week's episode, we talked a lot about the downfall of avoiding our pain when we stuff things down and we just don't deal with issues, right? And that's a big piece of this unity breaker that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But today, we want to wrap our brains around the difference between peacekeeping and peacemaking.
Yeah.
Because peacekeeping does not create unity.
Nope.
It keeps us divided. Whereas peacemaking is an approach that leads to more unity and more connection in our relationship. So let's just unpack this a bit.
Yeah, let's use kind of a typical scenario that we hear around step-family life. And we've experienced it plenty of times. So you're the step-parent. I'll share this from my perspective as a step-parent. Maybe you've noticed this ongoing pattern that when you and your spouse are having a conversation or you're trying to connect, one of the stepkids interrupts the conversation and asks, maybe demands something from your spouse. And then your spouse immediately jumps up and attends to that child, and they kind of leave you alone mid-sentence even.
Oh.
And then your spouse now seems to be off and running in a different direction and for a good length of time.
Right.
And maybe they even forget to come back and check in with you or finish up the conversation you were having. So you're there, kind of left in the dust, feeling abandoned, unheard, maybe deprioritized, and you're basically stuck in this painful reality of what we would call the stranded stranger experience. Now, if you've listened to the show for any length of time, you know exactly what that stranded stranger experience is. So the question is, what do you do? Are you typically a peacekeeper or a peacemaker?
Great question. So, honey, you've been in that exact situation before where I jump up and attend to Annika's needs and kind of just leave you in the dust.
Yep.
So you certainly can relate to the pain of the stranded stranger in that moment. But how do you think a peacekeeper would react to this situation?
Yeah, well, earlier you said we kind of vacillate between peacekeeping and peacemaking, and I definitely have vacillated in that over the years. There have been plenty of times when I've been a peacekeeper, and my overarching goal in that time is to kind of avoid the conflict, so I don't really feel like rocking the boat in that moment, right? And a peacekeeper would most likely do their best just to kind of suck it up. At least that's what I've done. And unknowingly, this actually creates quite a bit of work and energy because peacekeepers often have an unconscious or at least an unrecognized process that sounds a little bit something like this. First, we tend to minimize our own pain. We might think, oh, it's not that big a deal. I don't want to make a molehill into a mountain, which I would argue that's true, but that's for a different show or a different episode at some point. And then maybe they do their best to push those painful emotions down. So they're minimizing their own pain.
Okay.
Second, they might decide to dismiss the impact. Might think to themselves, that conversation wasn't that important anyway. We can always talk about it later.
Okay.
Right. So we're now, not only have we minimized the pain, but now we're kind of dismissing the real impact that it has on my heart underneath things, right? Then we can tend to lean into rationalizing the dynamics.
Ooh.
She really needs to be able to go and attend to Annika's needs and respond to her in the moment. And okay, I guess that's a right thing. And by the time we get there, we might accidentally stumble into really reprimanding ourselves. We kind of should ourselves or shouldn't ourselves to death. I shouldn't feel upset about this. I shouldn't be this selfish. I should have more empathy and patience, right? Should. And now all of a sudden we're taking the blame.
Right.
Like, oh, it's my fault that, I'm feeling this way. And so all of that, we minimize our pain, dismiss the impact, rationalize the dynamics, reprimand ourselves. And by the time we get there, we just stay silent. I don't want to come across as being critical. I don't want to make him feel bad or end up fighting about this. So I'm just going to be quiet. So for now, I've kept the peace in the household, but I'm not really feeling peaceful.
Ooh,
Two different things.
There's no inner peace there.
No. And the reality is I go through all of that and you're skipping along into your day because you have no clue that all that's going on.
I'm oblivious.
Yeah.
So that process of the peacekeeper, just to review this, first we're going to minimize, dismiss, rationalize, reprimand self, and stay silent.
Yeah.
All of this sounds like some really unhealthy coping mechanisms to real pain, real emotional pain.
Yeah, that's because they are, right? And while the peacekeeper might really believe that they're preserving the peace and maintaining unity in their relationship, the reality is they're doing just the opposite. In the moment, it might feel right, but in the long run, we're asking for trouble. And this is because the peacekeeper isn't really being vulnerable with their spouse. What's really going on is they're concealing their true selves. And as that continues to happen over and over around this specific issue and probably many others, then that facade of the peacekeeper has built up and they've been working to maintain it. And that's kind of become their new normal.
Ooh.
They get focused on maintaining the false peace rather than resolving the underlying issues. I have been so guilty of this multiple times in our marriage, and it's resulted in this cycle of, peacekeeping for a while and then exploding, and then peacekeeping for a while and then exploding, and over and over again.
Volcanic eruption.
And my eruptions were volcanic.
Yeah, they were.
And that created distance between us, and it felt really lonely for me a lot of the time, honestly.
Yeah.
Like you said earlier, I really didn't feel known because I wasn't being genuine and authentic. So I was kind of making my own bed.
Yeah. And that just magnified the stranded stranger reality.
Yeah.
Right? You weren't breaking free from that. You were staying stuck there.
That's right.
That can be really tough when you're stuck there, living in those difficult emotions, feeling abandoned, unheard, deprioritized, and neglected in our relationship, honey, and feeling unknown, like you mentioned, because you weren't really showing up or being real. So how could I truly have known you?
Yeah.
And of course, this was the perfect storm for resentment and anger to fester and grow.
Exactly. It created some really tough seasons in our life. So, if you're listening to all this, it might make it a little easier to see why peacekeeping is a unity breaker. You really can't be united as a couple with all this kind of stuff going on.
No.
Eventually, the peacekeeper becomes a peace breaker when they get fed up and just kind of lose it, right? They can't possibly keep this facade up forever.
Or they're going to lose themselves.
Yeah, totally. It's just not a healthy response to pain. And so at some point, all that resentment and anger is going to boil up to the surface. It's going to spew out all over everyone in the family. Peacekeeping does not create unity.
Yeah. And I've learned the hard way over the years from our blending that avoidance doesn't solve problems. I've said that before. It just makes things worse.
Yeah, I mean, we're using my example right now, but you've been just as guilty of this.
I've talked about it a lot.
Yep.
But I heard an interesting statement from Ray McKelvey during their presentation. He said this: if you avoid conflict, you avoid intimacy. Yeah. And I really believe that now. I didn't years ago, but now I've come to believe that's true. Conflict done well is an opportunity to increase intimacy.
Totally. That's right.
So let's talk about what peacemaking might look like as opposed to peacekeeping.
Okay.
And, if you're listening, as we're exploring this, we really encourage you to think about how this approach might increase intimacy in your relationship.
Yeah, totally. So let's take the same scenario, okay? You're the step parent. You're feeling like a stranded stranger because of this painful pattern. Your stepchild's interrupting conversations between you and your spouse just disappears on you.
Right.
So if you were focused on being the peacemaker, we're going to shift to a little bit of a different process than the peacekeeper does. You might start by acknowledging your own pain.
Right.
Okay. So rather than pushing it down or trying to minimize that pain, peacemakers notice the pain that they're experiencing and they acknowledge that it's real and it's valid. The peacemaker doesn't rationalize anyone's behavior. They don't reprimand themselves. They don't blame or shame the other person.
No.
They just acknowledge the painful feeling. Next, they're going to do their best to initiate a conversation with their spouse. The peacemaker is going to invite their spouse to talk about the issue, and they're going to be strategic. They're going to choose a time when they're both calm, where they won't be interrupted.
So not in the heat of the moment.
Not in the heat of the moment. Maybe they're well-fed and well-rested and in a reasonably good mood and that kind of thing. And when they invite them, it might sound something just a little bit like this. Hey, I'm wondering when a good time might be for us to spend a little time talking about something that's important to me. Now, sometimes, the spouse might respond, well, how about right now?
Yeah.
Right? But other times they might say, yeah, that's great. Why don't we do that tomorrow afternoon over coffee or something like that?
Or after the kids go to bed.
Yeah, exactly. So inviting in this way actually frees them up to not have to talk about it right in the moment.
Right.
And that can be really helpful.
Okay.
So acknowledge the pain, we initiate the conversation, and then once we actually have the conversation, we want to be able to just, in an honorable way, communicate the impact.
Right.
The peacemaker is going to be honest about their stranded stranger reality and then choose to share what's going on inside in a way that honors their spouse and invites them into a conversation.
Right. So we're not blaming, we're not criticizing.
That's right. It might sound a little bit like this. Hey, I noticed last night that when we were talking, Annika interrupted our conversation and then we never came back around to reconnect. When that happens, it can make me feel like a stranded stranger, like I'm not a priority for you. I'm hoping we can work together to find a way to resolve this challenge in a way that honors both of us and Annika as well. What do you think? Right?
Yeah.
And pay attention to body language and pay attention to tone. Listen to the way that I said what I said just now, not just what I said.
So you're basically sharing the story in your head.
Yeah, exactly. And inviting you into a conversation. Right. And then once we get that going, then we want to focus on problem solving from an usness perspective.
Okay.
The peacemaker is going to work collaboratively with their spouse to brainstorm how they might handle this situation differently. They don't demand for things to abruptly change or go their way. Instead, they're going to strive to find a solution that's going to work for everyone involved. And they're willing to put in the effort and the energy to get there.
I love it.
We talked about Relate Strong earlier. In that program, we actually work with couples and give them a very specific problem-solving process that's step by step that we've found to be really powerful.
So effective.
Yeah, it's a great peacemaker tool.
Now, through that lens of building intimacy, think of how this process that Mike just mapped out, think about how that can actually bring you closer as a couple, build more intimacy. Now, if you're able to stay focused on usness, the problem actually becomes an opportunity to get more united as the couple works through their problem rather than pretending that there aren't any problems, right?
That's right, yeah.
And it starts with the peacemaker being vulnerable.
Yeah.
There's no smoke screen or facade going on. And on top of that, they aren't blaming anyone for their pain. They take responsibility for what they're experiencing. And they realize it's the challenging dynamics that creates the stranded stranger reality, not the people in their family.
That's right.
They're doing their best to show up well and exhibit the 6 powerful traits that we talked about in episode 105 that every couple needs to be successful and stay united. Those traits are empathy, humility, courage, flexibility, a curiosity mindset, and patience, of course.
That's right.
So peacemaking will naturally grow unity and intimacy for the couple and for the whole family as well. But peacekeeping, focusing on not rocking the boat or trying to put up that facade and avoid conflict. That's a false sense of peace at all costs, and it'll eventually become a unity breaker.
That's right. Now, as we've been talking about this, maybe you've realized that you've been in a little bit of a peacekeeper mode lately. Maybe you've got some resentments and anger that's been building, and you'd like to move from being a peacekeeper to a peacemaker.
Yeah.
But you don't know exactly how to go about having that conversation with your spouse like we just talked about. Maybe that feels difficult for you. That's okay. We've been there. We didn't learn this stuff overnight. You know, many of us grew up having to play the role of peacekeeper in our family of origin. We never really developed the ability to have assertive communication skills. Or some of us have tended to pick up more of a passive approach, or maybe others have tended to pick up more of an aggressive approach about expressing what they're feeling or not expressing.
Right.
You know, if any of that's you, a great starting point would be to go back and listen to episode 50 called How to Openly Communicate What You Really Want. Man, wouldn't it be awesome if we all could openly communicate what we really want?
It's amazing.
And you might just pick up a few ideas from that episode around how to more assertively move toward peacemaking rather than peacekeeping. And so we'll put a link in the show notes to that episode, as well as 105 that talks about those 6 powerful traits that Kim just mentioned. And if you're feeling really stuck, maybe you need to reach out to us. You can schedule a free coaching call directly with us, and we might be able to help you learn how to build the skills as a couple of how you can both become peacemakers to grow your unity and intimacy. We'll add a link to schedule that as well.
Yeah, it's amazing when you can get there. All right, let's tackle the last unity breaker, which can sometimes be a bit controversial in the blended family world.
That's right. You know, there's some who vehemently disagree with what we're about to share, and we respect that. And we understand the positive hopes and the really great heart that disagreement comes from.
And what we found in working with many couples over the years is that this well-meaning approach to blending a family can often bring the opposite of what is intended and actually break unity in the family.
Yeah.
And here it is, sidestepping. And that's when we tend to disregard the nature of step relationships. So what do we mean by this?
Yeah, let's talk about that.
You know, often in step family dynamics, couples believe that if they can just create the structure of a first family, that everyone will have the ability to unite more effectively. And here's what it sounds like. In this home, we aren't yours or mine, steps or halves. We are just family. And that's a plaque I actually found on Etsy.
Yep.
And it's a popular quote.
Sure.
And a popular belief for many step couples. But when a husband and wife insist on saying, we have no steps in this house, everyone's the same, we're just family, it can actually push children farther away and create disconnection within the home.
Yeah, and we know exactly how counterintuitive this seems because it sounds like such a loving, inclusive, and harmonious message.
It does.
But it can often trigger just the opposite because, again, it's focused on sameness instead of acknowledging the realities of your stepfamily dynamics. And often I think this mentality of there are no steps really does come from a great place in people's heart. There's a desire to quickly come together as a family unit and to keep everyone focused on being all in, really connected and functioning most similarly to a first family.
Yeah.
And again, don't get us wrong here. Most of the time, it does come from that good place, a positive hope. However, it's typically focused on what the adults hope to experience in their family in the future while disregarding what the kids might be actually experiencing today.
Right.
If a child in your home is hearing this sidestepping message that there's no steps in this family, we're just family, but they really don't feel like their step siblings are their brother or their sister, or they don't feel like that step parent is a real parent to them, this can trigger tremendous frustration and maybe even anger for them. When we force kids to view their step parent or step siblings as equal to their biological family, it can add to the painful circumstances that they must endure. And by the way, these are probably kids in a separation experience where they're moving back and forth between homes, and they're still connected to those other biological family members. And it just becomes one more thing that they don't agree with or they don't have any control over.
Yeah.
And by the way, as a product of a family where my mom passed away when I was really young, this experience actually exists for kids when their parent has died as well.
Yeah.
You know, step family expert Ron Deal says the difference in language between people reveals the lack of shared clarity and definition in their relationship. When one person says, there's no step relationships in our home, and the other person says, or even just thinks, oh, yes, there is, it's clear that there's no clarity in the family about who they are to one another or how they relate.
Wow, no clarity. You really can't get to a place of unity when clarity doesn't exist, can you?
Yeah, for sure.
You know, Ron goes on to say that this idea, everyone's the same in this family, may be a hopeful statement meant to bridge whatever gaps exist.
Yeah.
But when it collides with language that acknowledges the gaps and declares them okay, then conflict, guardedness, and entrenched hearts is the result.
Yeah.
So let's just unpack that, because that one statement is so profound.
Right.
What Ron's saying is that it's hopeful for us to want to bridge the gaps between the steps. And, you know, that's a really legitimate hope.
Oh, yeah, totally.
But it often creates big problems when this hopeful approach collides with or even inhibits the realistic dialogue that actually acknowledges and validates those gaps.
That's right.
That has to come first.
Yeah.
The healthy way to build more unity is to accept the unique differences of your step family structure and make it okay that we don't necessarily all feel the same about our step relationships as we do about our bio relationships.
Yeah,
That's
totally.
really the key.
Yep.
We first need to embrace and normalize the fact that there are step relationships in our home. It is what it is. And guess what? It's okay.
Right.
When we do this, it honors everyone's perspective in the family, and it opens up opportunity for genuine, authentic conversation. And ultimately, this will build the unity we're looking for. You know, we've been blending for 20 years, and Mike still refers to Annika as his stepdaughter in many settings because that's the truth. And the reality is he loves and cherishes Annika so much. And he has a really special place in his heart for her. It's not more or less than what he feels for his biological kids. It's not better or worse. It's simply different.
That's right.
And Annika understands and accepts this. She also loves Mike, and she expresses that to him. But her love for Mike isn't the same as how she feels about her biological dad.
Yeah.
And that's okay. We've always made that okay for her.
That's right. You know, sometimes with people, it feels like the word step is just kind of a bad word when it's used to describe family relationships. It can feel a little bit icky, especially when we're out in public or around people that we don't really know that well.
Right.
It may not convey the warm, fuzzy feelings that we might actually experience in our step relationships, or maybe we believe the term step waters down our family bond or devalues it. And I think there's just some misguided beliefs around step families in our culture that can make us feel maybe marginalized even. We might worry about being judged, or that our kids and stepkids will be treated differently if we identify as a step family. Sometimes maybe we just want to try to fit in.
Yeah, might even trigger some shame.
Yeah.
And it can be awkward sometimes. We're just going to call it out, you know.
Yeah, it is awkward sometimes.
Yeah. You know, I remember when Annika was, I think she was in 2nd or 3rd grade, and we were invited to the big, you know, parent open house, and all the children had pictures up on the wall that we were all looking at, and they had been asked to draw a picture of their home and their family.
Yeah.
And Annika's picture looked very different than all the other kids' picture, because she had 2 homes and 2 separate families. And she was included in both of these families.
Yeah, yeah.
And a lot of the parents were walking by and looking at her picture and kind of, you know, noticing, oh, hers is really different than all the other kids. I mean, this could have been a really awkward moment, but thankfully, Annika was not the least bit rattled by it. She was fine with the fact that her picture looked different because her dynamics were different.
That's right.
And it was okay. She didn't mind the fact that she had to draw something different than the other kids, but that was her reality.
Yep.
You know, the truth is step families are different than first families. We have complex dynamics. But the truth is also that we develop strength, fortitude, significance, and over time, loving bonds and genuine family identity.
Yeah.
Every step family is formed out of some kind of a loss. There may be a death, a divorce, or abandonment. But this gives the step family unique insight and empathy for others that have experienced loss.
For sure.
Those of us living in step families are survivors. We've learned how to overcome difficulties in life and to rebuild and create new beauty.
Yeah, that's right. And regardless of your history or how your step family was formed, you're not a second-class family. And no change in trying to use the word step or not use the word step is going to impact the authenticity and the love that exists in your family.
Yeah.
Thriving step families are instrumental and important to the healthy development of our communities, and we add value to the fabric of our society. This is the kind of message that needs to be clear to our kids, and we need to model it for them and help them understand that this is okay.
Right.
I love the fact that it's not about less or more, better or worse. It's just simply different. And you use the words, I think, that Annika has a very special place in my heart. You're absolutely right. And I think she proudly calls me her stepdad, and I call her my stepdaughter. And we've got a great bond, and we genuinely and vulnerably love each other.
Yeah, but she's never called you dad.
No,
and
she never has, and that's totally fine.
She has a dad.
That's right. That's right.
So let's go ahead and wrap this up. And we want to end on a practical note by drawing one last time from the wisdom of Ron Deal. He says that biological relationships have the built-in luxury of nonverbal connection, right? Parent-child attachment and family identity has been there since day one of a child's life.
Sure.
Love just is. But step relationships don't have that advantage. And unless people get to know one another and bring understanding and clarity to the nature of their relationship, trust will remain tentative and shallow. That's why we need to be patient and authentic while trust develops.
For sure.
And what this really means is that we may need to let go of our own high expectations and instead create an environment that has low pressure and develops slowly, and gradually bonds will emerge. We need to be okay with this word step, okay? It's not a bad four-letter word. It's really not.
Yeah, that's right. And Ron says that step relationships are defined by what is communicated, negotiated, and co-created.
I love that.
You can't take anything for granted. That's important for us because sidestepping is going to take a lot for granted. Mainly that all of the kids feel that their step relationships are equal to their bio relationships. And that's a really big leap to make. And there's a high likelihood that it could backfire in the long run.
It really could. So if communication is what can help us to clarify step relations, then we'd be wise to just initiate conversations with each family member and ask some questions around how they feel and what they're comfortable with when it comes to family terms, labels, and expectations. And we're going to talk more about this with Ron Deal himself next week here on the show. Yeah. And we're going to talk about his new book that goes deep into this topic of co-creating familyness. So you don't want to miss that.
For sure.
But for now, if you're feeling a little convicted in this area, maybe you've been adopting that sidestepping attitude and approach, we'd like to encourage you. Rather than focusing on that quote I read earlier, in this home we aren't yours or mine, steps or halves, we're just family. Instead, choose to lean into something more along the lines of this quote. The love of a step family isn't living in a perfect picture, but creating something beautiful from what was once broken.
That's so great. And creating takes time.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the most beautiful creations in our world, like the stunning art we get to enjoy in so many different cultures, took time, patience, and skill to create.
Absolutely.
And if you focus on those three things too, you'll move closer to that unity you're hoping to create.
Mm-hmm.
Step-family educator Laura Petherbridge says, rather than forcing kids to view the step-parent or step-siblings as equal to their biological family, it's much better to let those relationships move at their own pace and blossom over time. Let them morph into what comes naturally. Allowing for that morphing to happen requires time and patience and some skill as well.
Absolutely. All right. So those are your 3 unexpected unity breakers.
Mm-hmm.
First one, sameness. You don't need to be the same to build unity.
That's right.
And then there's peacekeeping. You really want to shift and become a peacemaker instead, and you can do that. And then sidestepping. We want to honor the unique dynamics and differences between step and bio relationships.
Yeah.
We encourage you to honestly consider if any of these attitudes or approaches might be occurring in your home or in your heart. Because you might be making an easy wrong turn that could lead your family in the opposite direction of where you really want to be.
Yeah, and it's our desire that you'll hold on to your hopes for your family around unity.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, consider how you might take steps toward building unity in a healthy way. And if you need some help, please don't hesitate to reach out. Use that link in the show notes to schedule a free coaching call with us, and we'd be happy to help you start building your unity.
Yes.
Okay. You don't want to miss next week, where we're going to talk to Ron Deal about his new book that actually releases next Tuesday, the same day that we drop the episode.
Woohoo!
And we can't wait for you to learn from Ron. But for now, that makes this episode a wrap.
Until next time.